Beyond the Hype, Intentional AI Adoption for VOC. This conversation is to help you lead intentional AI adoption with confidence. I'll get started with some introductions. So first of all, if you've not met me before, I'm Nat. I'm the Head of Customer Success at Wordnerds, and I hear your challenges daily. Joining us today, we've got Hugh, our Head of Data Science, who has been building with AI before the hype. We've got Damani, who is our Senior Machine Learning Engineer and built Enterprise NLP at Kantar before joining Wordnerds earlier this year. And finally, we've got Steph, our Head of Product, who helps shape our future direction. Before we get started, some housekeeping for today. Do introduce yourself, pop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. Feel free to share what the weather's like where you are. It's pretty grey and gloomy here in Sunderland. At the end, we're going to have a live Q&A with our expert panel, so do add your questions in the chat anytime. We'll flag them during the conversation and cover them all at the end in one go during the Q&A. We're only going to use public data. I just want to flag that you will see a live demo later on, and just to assure you, we're only going to be using public data for that. At the end, we're going to be sharing a recording today, straight after the session, of the full session. But later on in the week, you're going to get a resource pack with each chapter broken down and some additional resources to help you put this into practice. Finally, your pets are welcome and in fact encouraged. I'm kind of flagging that because during our run-throughs, our pets kept joining us. So if they happen to get crashed today, I just want to give you some advance notice of that. So let's see who we've got joining us. We've got Joseph from Sage. Hi, Joseph. We've got Rob. Isla in Northumberland too, but the rain has stopped. Lucky you. Cool. Well, it looks like a lot of people have joined. Hi, Emma. Jane. Hi there. Super gloomy in the Northeast. We've got lots of people from Sage joined today. Very exciting. Amy from True Potential. Fab. Great to see you as well. Alan from DWP. It's so fab to see so many familiar names as well. It's very exciting. Anyway, we've got a packed agenda today, so we're going to get started. So if you're thinking, why am I here? Well, these are the conversations that you've been telling us that you're having. And what's really interesting is that a lot of our customers, especially the ones that have been with us for years, were actually the first people in their organizations to bring in AI. They were the innovators. But now everybody in their organization is talking about AI. And these are those adoption conversations that you've told me you're having. Let's just put it in Copilot. Let's build this ourselves. We have AI insights in other tools. And you've also got colleagues who feel like it's all hype and want to wait and see. But what does this mean for you? Well, this is the dream analysis machine that I know you're building. You want to get all of your data from any data source into one place for that scalable, robust, and consistent analysis. And when it comes to text analytics in particular, what really matters is speed, flexibility, depth, and accuracy. And why does this matter? Because ultimately what you want to be able to do is make confident decisions, prove ROI, and really make a difference. We wanted to recap on that end goal, just so we have that in mind when we talk about those conversations that you're now having. So this is the agenda for our journey today and how we're going to unpack those conversations one by one. Starting with Hugh, we're going to talk about that conversation around, let's just put it in Copilot. Hugh's going to demystify AI for us. He's going to share our assessment framework for intentional AI adoption. And he's going to give you a demo of our new definition-led themes that are rolling out on the platform next month. Then Damani is going to talk about the conversation around let's build this ourselves. He's going to take us behind the scenes of our recent build, how we used our assessment framework and share the hidden cost of innovation. Finally, Steph is going to answer that question around having AI insights in other tools. AI insights are everywhere now, but are they actually working for you? We're going to talk about the hidden cost of fragmentation and also using the specialist tool as your force multiplier. As we have got that packed agenda, I'm going to hand over straight away to Hugh so that we can get started. So over to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Naz. So as Nat said, I'm going to attempt to give you our take on how we respond to, let's just put it in Copilot as an idea. I'm going to have to do that by explaining some AI terms to begin with. So I'm going to get that out of the way, give you a few definitions, because otherwise everything else I say is going to be quite confusing for half the audience. So bear with me while I do that. So these are the terms we'd like to use in the presentation. The first one to talk about is artificial intelligence. It's probably the easiest one to understand. We're just talking about computer systems that can perform complex tasks normally done by human reasoning, decision-making, creativity, etc. It's an umbrella term for a lot of different things. you'll find it's misused a lot at the minute, or not necessarily misused, but it's used in a way that suggests it's something very narrow, and it's not. It's a very broad field that has a lot of different approaches in it. Within that, you have machine learning. That is an approach to artificial intelligence. Is one way of doing it. Definition is written on the screen there. This one ends up being slightly more confusing for some people, but essentially it's when you're using data and algorithms to train computers to do the AI. Sometimes that terminology makes it sound more confusing than it needs to if you're just trying to deal with it as a concept. Obviously, if you're doing it, you need to know the detail, but you don't just to understand it as a concept. Basically, imagine this as there's some sort of little black box. You're taking loads of real world examples on one side and the outputs you're expecting to receive on the other. And you have a process that will automatically go through and tweak all the little dials on the side of the box to make it consistently output a good answer. You don't super need to think about what's in the box, to be honest. It's better if you don't on occasion. Machine learning has all sorts of different approaches to how you manage the internals of the box and how you manage the process, but they'll come under the category of their own machine learning approach. And that's that is a super important thing to distinguish from broad artificial intelligence, and also distinguish from the Gen AI we're going to talk about later. Within machine learning, there's a specific subset of that that's deep learning, and that's about having I'm going to say neural network. I'm not going to tell you what neural network is because it's such a long thing to describe and you don't really need to know. But deep learning network is essentially one of the things that's really exploded over the last sort of decade or a bit more, where people found that having just enormous layers of neural networks in this little black box was able to achieve really quite astounding things. So that area is where a lot of people, when they're talking about AI, they're talking about this section now, but it's not AI, right? AI is much broader and has a lot more things to it. Within deep learning, you have a very specific thing that is now the thing that you more or less are always hearing about when people refer to AI. They're talking about generative AI. So generative AI, by its nature, is not normally categorizing something or doing anything else. It produces new produces new stuff. In our case, that would normally be text. It can be images. That's still generative AI. That field has totally exploded and is the thing that you will find people chatting about on LinkedIn or whatever constantly. It's one very specific thing, though. If you imagine tools like Copilot from Microsoft, OpenAI's ChatGPT, or Google's Gemini, you're probably imagining like a chat interface. Those chat interfaces all are a layer above a core model, rather large black box that is running in the background that is doing the intelligence part of it. So whenever you hear those names, those are all using generative AI in the background. But it's worth understanding that you don't have to use generative AI like that. It doesn't have to be part of a chat interface. Like, just embracing Gen AI does not mean having a chat interface everywhere. That's not necessarily the case. It can sit in the background doing stuff without you even appreciating that's how it worked. And the other thing that terms you might hear thrown around are things like transformers. Transformers were an architectural change to how the insides of the black box work. They came about in about 2018, and that allowed the explosion in performance we've seen on these kinds of tools that's happened over the last several years. And large language models are just the name of the underlying deep learning network. Very last thing I'll talk about, and I don't want to spend too long on this stuff. Natural language processing is the broad term used for having AI that will enable computers to talk to humans and understand human language. And it isn't specifically a Gen AI thing or a deep learning thing or a machine learning thing. It's just an AI thing. It can be anywhere in that those circles. So hopefully we're all on roughly the same page with the terms. I'll try not to use any other elaborate ones. The thing I'm going to move on to now, so bearing in mind what I'm trying to address here is, why don't we just use Copilot for this stuff? I think the first thing I want to introduce here is what our journey to this point is, so you understand where we're coming from with the things we're going to say. Wordnerds have been doing something broadly in the category of voice of customer since about 2019, when we made the platform that if you're a current customer, the one that you log into, that platform, that started in 2019. That started right as transformers that I just talked about, just as they were released. So we got, like, our platform is built as an AI first tool. We built it with the idea of using these technologies from the start. So we got to have a platform that was never built around the idea that you might manually code a load of data, or that you might or that you might build a big taxonomy of all the different keywords that might appear. That's never been a sort of first party thing that we're trying to achieve in our platform. We're trying to achieve a platform that uses the advances of AI when they became good enough that this is something they could do well, which is really great for us. But it also means that that's not when it ended. 2019 is not the point at which large language models just became static. Every couple of years, there is a new big wave of something that we've always had to adopt and figure out, is this a good thing to put on our platform? Is that actually adding value? For example, a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 18 months ago, that's the first point that realistically we're going to put the equivalent of ChatGPT in your platform. That's the first time that was a realistic prospect. We chose not to do it at that point. We didn't feel like it was particularly valuable. The kind of thing that it would do is essentially just give you like a little chat interface to your help docs or something, which is cool and might be a bit useful, but it's not fundamentally changing what it's like to try and use a text analysis platform for voice of customer. So we didn't do it, but we have been trying to like going through the process of working out what needs to be the case to make this work. At what point is it the thing that we should do? It's obviously where things are going in that direction. At what point do we need to release features that include that? So I'm going to take you through now the way we think about this, the way we think about how to adopt generative AI, as in Copilot, into a voice of customer tech stack. The first thing to say is it's useful to understand broadly the good things and bad things about Gen AI. There are some amazingly good things. So if I start there, the thing that stands out above all to me is the ability for it to take context about you and your particular situation to tailor your results. That's something that is sort of possible in traditional machine learning, but it involves way more customization per particular use case and things in a way that is, it's doable, but it's expensive. It's the sort of thing that ends up not really happening as effectively as you'd like. It just is like that from the start, which is an amazing feature of a tool like this. It's also, because you're interacting with it in text, it's much more understandable from a human point of view. And depending on what you're doing, that can also mean it's a very low barrier to getting something that functions. Like, you don't necessarily have to build a load of elaborate stuff. The Gen AI can just manage that. It's a really cool aspect of it. And those are the really important kind of advantages that mean this is an area that is important to explore and important to ask whether we should be doing it. You have to pair it with the problems. It's not all a good picture. So the big things to understand are Gen AI is slow by comparison to the alternatives. If you imagine those circles, if you go a bit out to the machine learning or even deep learning section, it is really slow by comparison. The kinds of there is no answer to this question, by the way. There isn't like it's this much faster. It depends on what you're doing. But for the particular things we looked at for it, we're talking about sort of 200 times slower. So it's not like a bit slower, it is a lot slower. It's also incredibly expensive by comparison. 500 times is the number we came out with. Again, depends what you're trying to do and what Gen AI you're using. There is no answer to that question, but I want to put that in to give you an idea. It's a lot more expensive. It's not a little bit more expensive. It's a lot more expensive. Part of that also means it's also worse for the environment, right? It's using a lot more resources to do that. You're paying for largely the energy when you're using that. The expense thing, it's worth understanding as well. What that really means is that it's cost so much that you couldn't really use it to drop in replace the kind of things we feel like you should be able to do. What that would actually mean is that you just can't use as much of it. Artificial limits get put on it. So like in our case, if you're one of our customers, you'll understand the concept of themes in our platform. We don't want to put like a limit on the idea that you can have 2 new themes a month, or that you can only apply them for a certain period of time. We want you to use them as much as you want to use them and apply them to all your data. We don't want to be in a position where you can't compare Black Friday this year to last year because, oh, that's past the 12-month cutoff, sorry, so you can't do it. That's not how we want to approach this stuff. So the expense thing, really what that means is, what limits do we have to put in place to make it affordable? And hallucinations. All systems make mistakes, right? Humans make mistakes. There is no version of this where things are perfect. Generative AI has a particularly funny relationship with making mistakes. It has a tendency to come out with very convincing sounding incorrect answers. And that is just the nature of it. And it's a particular risk to manage when dealing with it. Hallucinations are just the nature of these networks, by the way. They're basically built to predict the next word. They're built to make coherent sounding language. The fact that they are able to answer questions and all those other things is actually miraculous. That's what they do, because they're actually just trying to make coherent sounding text. That leads them to make hallucinations. They're getting better and better, but that is not going away. There's not like an answer to that that's just going to suddenly arrive. So it's a thing you need to kind of learn to manage. So what I've got for you to try and answer this question is, I want to take you through our kind of checklist for how we treat generative AI as part of a wider system, and how we interpret that, and how we decide how we should have changed that system to make it work better. The first thing to address is this hallucinations and kind of unreliability of it. So I've got on the screen, you'll see a quadrant graph. What I'm trying to illustrate on this is the different kinds of problem that you can apply generative AI to, and the kind of behavior you should expect, and therefore how you might choose to change it. So, for example, if you're a customer support person and you have a tool that will automatically draft you a response to an incoming email, that's really great on this graph. If you look up the side, we've got how subjective is the answer. So an email is entirely subjective, right? There might be, a handful of, there's probably quite a lot of correct answers, and there's a load of different ways of saying the correct answer. It's quite subjective overall. How easy is it to spot the mistake? If you're the expert and it's drafting the email for you, you can spot the mistake. So it lands, that's a little A in the hexagon at the top. That represents how well we think email drafting would work as a thing. It's in a nice space. It's likely to work well. It's likely to be quite reliable. And when it does go wrong, it doesn't matter as much. It's because it's easy to spot, it doesn't really matter. How does that get affected by putting that same technology, exactly the same idea, into a tool that just automatically responds instead of letting you read it? For us, the way we think about that is that's moving it into a less easy to spot region. So you've introduced some risk. Doesn't mean you can't possibly do it, right? You can still think about doing it, but it should make you aware that this is going to go wrong in an unpleasant way quite a lot. We're going to have to build quite a lot around this, safety nets, guardrails, to make this behave itself, and you're still going to have mistakes. It's just the nature of this kind of thing. It might be slightly, to illustrate the point a bit further, you can imagine like a medical diagnosis app, so you can self-diagnose. Say the NHS release an app where everyone can, chat to it and it'll tell them what's wrong with them. That on the subjectivity scale is really low down, right? There is a correct answer as to whether you have some awful illness or don't have this illness, and you're not going to know that it's wrong. That's the reason you're using the app. So it puts you firmly, and this is the C in the hexagon in the bottom left, firmly in the very risky category. It's about as risky as you're going to get there. But exactly the same idea moved across and given to doctors is now they can spot the mistakes. So this is how this works for us. And it's not about saying you can't possibly do that one. It's about figuring out, how do I change this arrangement so that I'm no longer in quite as risky a situation? So to get to the point, Copilot, where would we put just using Copilot for feedback analysis? For us, we've put that into the risky category. There is a correct answer. Like you don't want the tool to be telling you, making recommendations about what you do to your business that are unfounded, that just sound nice, right? That's not what you want. And it's not going to be easy for you to spot, because you'll do some due diligence, presumably, of the results, but fundamentally, like, you use the tool to save you time. If you have to go read everything to establish if it was right, it's not really done its job. Okay, so that's where it is for us. So it's a very appealing idea. It's got some real risks around it that need to be managed. So we try to break this down further, like which bit of that is a manageable thing, which bit can we turn into a scalable thing that's reliable. And that's where we picked out categorization of the data. So could you use Copilot? I mean, we don't actually use Copilot, we use Gemini, which is the Google equivalent, but could you use Copilot to categorize data? For us, that initially comes into this risky category, but that's where the interesting bit starts, right? How do you change it from that? What do you do about it to make it no longer risky? That's what we're going to take you through in a minute. Damani's going to talk a bit more about it, but that journey is what I'm about to talk you through. The other things on the checklist are a bit easier to talk through. can it run efficiently? Mostly in voice of customer, what we experience is people have a volume of data where you can't just throw Gen AI at it. You can't put, a million phone calls a month through Copilot and expect to get a reasonable result or an efficient result. Certainly, you can't retrospectively go back and say, I want to look at the last 5 years worth of data. It's just not going to work. When you come up with a new thing you want to find in it, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you can't just use that. The thing that we find is a really kind of underutilized way of using Gen AI is to supervise more basics, not really fair, slightly older models that can be very effective, but bring the benefit of what Gen AI can do into them, bring that knowledge about who you are and what you want, bring that human interface in as a supervising layer over a machine learning network, our smaller black box now, that is very efficient and can run at scale. That's where we see the pattern in voice of customer based on the volume of data, right? And the kind of needs of someone doing a voice of customer analysis. The final bit is, how do you test it? I know this sounds super basic, but it's worth just understanding. Putting through a couple of things through into ChatGPT and saying, look, it works. That's not the end of the story. There are all sorts of extra things that you need to consider when testing this stuff. Maybe it works for you. Does it work for somebody who uses slightly different language because they're from a different part of the country or has a different version of the problem that they're talking about than you've appreciated exists? When we're testing this stuff, we're testing it with tens and tens of thousands of examples. Then we're changing the prompt a bit and testing it all again because you get a different result. So you end up spending a bunch of time and money, because it's not cheap to run, testing all of this stuff. And if you just release a thing where it appeared to work on your examples a bunch of times, that doesn't mean it actually consistently works. And that's like how finding a problem you can actually verify is working properly is a big part of this. Breaking your system down into problems you can actually test is an important stage in this. So I've done a run through of how we think about these problems. I'm now going to try and demo the feature that we built, the how do we do categorization, taking advantage of Gen AI. I'm going to try and demo that now and talk you through some of the advantages and how we've catered for getting into the right quadrant of this. So bear with me while I get that running. Right. We should hopefully be, we're hopefully seeing that. So I'll do an example here. We're using, as Nat said, we're using public data. So this is all Twitter, X data on the retail space. So I'm going to talk about out-of-date products, I think. So the flow you previously went through when you trained a theme is to manually, you go through for about 15 minutes tagging individual bits of data. So you would it would basically present to you the things it thought you needed to answer in order for it to get an impression of what to do. This is firmly from the machine learning background, right? So remember, we've got all our real world data and then we're twiddling dials. That's what it's doing. What we're doing now is, instead of you having to show it what you want by finding examples, or indeed making up examples if it's a really rare idea, which is happens now and then, you tell it what you want. So here we're going to go for out of date products, moldy. Oh. So we're giving it a prompt here. This isn't a, what I've written there is not the definition. What I've written there is a chat essentially to, in this case, Gemini, to tell it this is roughly what I want. It's going to take that, understand your data, understand what's in it, and try and turn that into a definition that will consistently work. It will then apply that over all of your data, doing the equivalent of about 24 hours with retraining. You do 15 minutes, it's doing the equivalent of 24 hours now. It will then, in order to make us move across that graph, going from the risky category into something that you can actually spot the mistakes of, we're going to produce all these different results to help you understand how is it performing and what does it think is going on. So you would have, initially it's rewritten this definition. So it's rewritten that into something it thinks makes sense. Your job as the person, the expert, the person who knows exactly what you want, is to read that, check that you actually agree that that's what you wanted. It's likely to add information to try and make it clear what you actually want. That's your opportunity to, if it's got the wrong end of the stick, to fix it. It's also going to show you how effectively it thinks it can do it. From looking at that data, how well does it think it could categorize that? In this case, it thinks it could do it pretty well. It reckons about 1.5% of your data is in that category. It's going to show you the stuff that is, from its point of view, that is in that category. And this is your opportunity to realize, right, yeah, normally it'd be, yeah, I can see why it thinks that, but actually, no, that's not what I want. I'm going to clarify that that isn't actually what I wanted. I'm going to say, you know, this for me doesn't count. Most companies have their own version of what each of these are. You know, is that part of my category or not? And they get to add exclusions at that point. It'll also show you, like, where's the middle ground? At what point does it go from thinking this is what you want to isn't? That's where you're going to see your problems, right? That's normally where you'd see, all right, that line is not really in the right place. I need to go clarify what I want. I need to make it clear that I definitely want that kind of stuff, or I definitely don't. And it allows you to find that kind of stuff. And that's basically it. This is how you train a theme now. You can go correct it, right? Obviously, you can go chat and say, actually, I do or don't want this, or you can just manually go and write the definition however you want. If the AI is not playing that day, you can just go write it in. But what this allows is very rapidly trained themes that are of a much higher quality, because the other thing I haven't really talked about is, yes, it's essentially training the theme for you in the background, but the theme it's training is much better than the ones that are currently on the platform. There's a major upgrade in the performance of them. And as part of it, we're rolling out a much faster pipeline to process the data. So even on our largest data set, we're expecting tens of minutes to apply this theme, rather than being a thing that takes, I don't know, however long. So it's really much more rapid. So we're really excited to see what people do with this. Really excited to see people using it a lot. And that's it from me. Back to you, Nat.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that, Hugh. That is pretty much the first peek that any of our customers have seen of that new feature. It's going to be rolled out next month, as Hugh said, and really looking forward to getting your feedback on that. Hopefully we'll get our slides back. There we go. There we go. Just to recap on some of those key points from what we've just heard there, because I know it was a lot of information. I think what really came through to me was that idea of using the right AI for the right jobs. And actually, a lot of the hype that has happened over the last couple of years is really about Gen AI. And that's why using that assessment framework can help you identify what use of Gen AI makes sense for your organization. It gives you the opportunity to have a look at how you're using Gen AI now, and if that makes sense to what you're trying to achieve. As you mentioned, Damani's now going to be talking us through the build journey for that particular feature to give you a realistic look of what that looks like. So I will hand over to Damani now. Over to you.
Thanks, Nat. So yeah, as Nat said, I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience of building a tool like this. It's kind of really to answer that question of, like, can we build it ourselves? We want to just tell you what's involved in that. I've definitely been at times in previous jobs and in my current job, and I would be in the future, kind of always advocating to build stuff because I like building cool things. But you know, sometimes the fun part isn't the whole journey. So I really want to talk about kind of what our full journey with this is, and you can kind of get an idea of the amount of work that's gone into building something like this. So as with everything, it starts with an idea. We kind of keep up to date with advancements in technology, and obviously with ChatGPT and Gemini and other large language models, they've really kind of shot up in terms of the amount that they can do, how accurate they are, and they've really impressive kind of tasks they're capable of handling now. So we thought, why not try and categorize data using LLMs and the kind of power that's in them to try and improve what we already had. There are some problems with this, which you've kind of mentioned. Our customers have huge amounts of data. So when you've got a large amount of data that you're going through, these kinds of AI models can be quite slow, even though generally their APIs are quite fast. If you're sending a lot of data through that, it can slow it down, and therefore it becomes also quite expensive and also quite bad for the environment. There also is kind of the problem of, when we think about that quadrant that Hugh showed before, naturally this problem kind of sits in that risky area. There's generally a right answer to a categorization, but because of the huge amounts of data, it's hard to spot problems if you just present it in a very random way. So we wanted to kind of address these problems with what we built. So our solution was to try and distill the power of these huge LLMs down into a really kind of small, lightweight model. The model is a neural network. I know Hugh touched on it briefly, but they're very kind of, we're talking about a very, very small, really lightweight model. The benefit of that is then that reduces the cost, and it improves the speed massively, and also therefore has a better impact on the environment. And we wanted to move out of that quadrant, that risky quadrant, into kind of a more comfortable position by designing a tool and a user interface that made it easy for our customers to identify where their definitions might be going wrong, where it might be getting confused, and kind of refine that and make sure that it's doing exactly the job that they need. Now, this is was all a great idea, but before we could do any of that, we needed to experiment, and we needed to prove that what we had in our heads could actually be done in real life. So the first kind of phase of this whole development process was experimenting and just kind of proving that it was a viable idea. There was kind of two stages to this experimentation phase. The first one was just seeing if we could actually get one of these large language models to be good enough to do what we wanted it to do. It needed to be better than what we were doing before, and we needed to kind of validate that. So we decided on Gemini in the end, but at the start we kind of kept our minds open to whatever the solution might be. We looked at different open source models. We looked at the cost of potentially hosting those models ourselves versus using an API to get them to kind of help us categorize data. There also is the issue of, if you ask a model the exact same question with the exact same data in a slightly different way, the results can vary massively. Even if you ask it in exactly the same way twice, sometimes the results might change a little bit, and that's because they're designed to be creative, but that's not necessarily always the best thing. And on that note, there's other parameters that the models use that we needed to tweak and play around with to see what gave us the kind of best results. Things like temperature, which is a setting which tells it how creative we actually want the model to be when we're categorizing data. Also things like how much data do we give it at one time. If you give it too much, it can confuse it. If you give it too little, then the process becomes really slow. So we really wanted to work out what the best kind of way of getting an LLM to do this kind of categorization was for us. When we kind of experimented with that and we found a solution where we were confident that it was a lot better than what we had before, then we wanted to try and distill this down into a smaller model. So in that first phase, it was me and Hugh mainly working together on this, experimenting and kind of discussing our results with each other. But when it got to the point where we wanted to distill, we brought in a consultant data scientist called Dean, who is kind of an expert in what we call deep learning. So he really helped lead that kind of second step of experimentation. We tested, to be able to kind of do this, we needed to turn our text into numbers. So we use a thing called an embeddings model, which basically takes the sentence, turns it into like a list of numbers, which represents in a kind of mathematical sense what that sentence means. That is then passed into one of these really small models that we used, and we used the results from kind of a small set of data from the LLM to then train these models to basically copy what the LLM was doing, but in a much kind of more efficient and quick way. So we tested numerous strategies for that. The whole process took us maybe around 4 months to kind of get to a point where we were confident that this was the right solution. And then when we were there, the results were really kind of encouraging. What we had built was a lot cheaper than just using an LLM. It was a lot faster. So Hugh talked a bit about the speeds that we could do. We could apply it to a whole kind of data set in 10 minutes, which comparatively was just way quicker than what we could have done with just an LLM on its own. And obviously cost effective, viable for our customers to actually use. And the new system was a lot more accurate than what we had previously. So we also wanted to make sure that we're improving, right? We don't want to bring something out where it's worse or, you know, just kind of similar, but we wanted to really kind of push the envelope and make it better. At that point, though, what we had was great. We were certain that this idea would work, but it only really existed on my laptop and Hugh's laptop, which, you know, if we were just going to use it, that's great, but we want to put this into the hands of our customers. We wanted other people within Wordnerds to be able to play around with it and tell us what they thought about it. So we needed to build it as an actual kind of production tool that we could roll out to people. That started off with us prototyping and testing a new user interface. So we needed to play around with that, think about what is the best way that we could present our data so that when people are creating their themes, that they can really see what's kind of going wrong, what's going right, and make the tweaks in a kind of clever way. So we really need to move that out of that kind of risky quadrant into a more kind of comfortable place. We needed to build and deploy the necessary kind of cloud infrastructure. So we don't want it to be a tool where people have to go through a long installation process or only technical people can really handle it. We want it to be anyone who can use a web browser can go onto our tool and use this. So it needed to be deployed in the right way. And we needed to ensure also that it was secure. So when you're handling with text data, there's a lot of personal information that might sit inside of that. Obviously, you don't want your data going out to people that you don't want to see it. You want it secure for yourself. So we needed to ensure that security was really up to standard and following kind of the regulations that we follow within Wordnerds. We also really needed to integrate with everything that we have. We've got a platform that has more tools than just this. So it needed to be integrated with all of that stuff. And it needed to be integrated kind of in a clever way with our existing code base. So we weren't breaking anything and we weren't causing any kind of major disruption when we were doing this. So that took maybe another 2 months to get us to the point where we're at now, where we've deployed an internal test version. So people within Wordnerds are able to go around and play with these now. We've got a full customer rollout coming very soon. So in November, we're planning to roll this out to our customers and you guys will get a chance to play around with it. So another 2 months for us to kind of get to that point there. Now, the whole process took maybe about 6 months for us to get to where we are now. And there is kind of a cost associated with that. The first phase, where it's about 4 months, took a lot of mine and Hugh's time of experimenting. We also had to bring in our consultant data scientist. But however, when we moved on to building the actual production tool, that required skills that weren't necessarily within just mine or Hugh's role. It required people with user interface and front-end development skills to help us build the tool and ensure that that works in a kind of intuitive way. We needed to bring in people who are experts in infrastructure to ensure that it scaled correctly. So if people are putting loads of data through, it doesn't just fall down. We need to ensure that it was working in a kind of reliable way. Security specialists to ensure that anywhere that we hand over data, there's no potential of it leaking anywhere. There's no potential of, any kind of models taking it to train themselves, that we don't want to do that. We need to make sure that everything we had was really locked down. And product managers to help us kind of guide the vision of where we wanted to go and to help us make sure that the product was actually usable for our customers at the end kind of process. So you can imagine that's a whole team of people. There is a significant cost associated with that. So while the dream of building something is great, I mean, I love building things like this. This is, the kind of ideation phase, the getting to work with these kind of technologies is really fun for me. That's only really a small bit of it. We could have really got to a rough version that just existed on my laptop and maybe worked for 1 or 2 themes in a couple of weeks. But to have something that worked for loads of different data types, that we knew worked in a reliable way, that we were confident was doing exactly what we needed it to do in the variety of situations that it needed to be used in, took a lot of experimentation. As I said, it took us about 4 months of experimentation to get to a point where we were happy with the model. And then on top of that, we also had the development of the tool. and building the user interface and the security compliance and all of those kind of aspects. So there's a huge amount of work after kind of getting to this really early stage. So maybe about 2 weeks to get to our rough version, but to get all the way to the point where we are now, there's a whole huge amount of work. And actually that bit was 80% of the work. The idea is quite quick to get to. Getting it to a kind of finished tool was really the hard bit. And obviously, once we've built this, now we've got this here, once we release it, we're not gonna, just dust our hands off and go, okay, tool's done, we're gonna leave it there. There's kind of a continuous commitment that we make to these things. So obviously, when you guys use it, you'll have questions for us about how to use it. Inevitably, bugs will arise. There'll be updates that need to be made to different technologies that sit underneath it. There'll be advancements in technologies, and we want to stay ahead of those. We want to make sure that we're delivering the best products that we can. Troubleshooting, all of those kinds of things are an additional job that happens well after we've built the tool, and we'll continue to do that for a long time. And it takes a bigger team than just me and Hugh to kind of maintain those things. So while the kind of beginning part is really fun, that's what I love, that's the bit of my job that I really love, there is a lot of hard work that comes after that. So the dream and the reality are kind of two slightly different things. We do enjoy building things like this, but without the kind of team that we had supporting us and without the kind of resources that we had allocated, it wouldn't have been something that was manageable for a team of two. So yeah, that's kind of the journey that we went on to build what you've just seen, what Hugh just presented to you. I hope that gives you a bit of context about what's needed to build something like this. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful for you. Back to you, Nat.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Damani. I know a lot of you have been talking about your teams looking at building some tools in-house, and so that particular chapter will be a great one to forward on to your teams so they can see Damani's real look at that process. I think, again, I know we've taken in a lot of information there, just pulling out a few key things that stood out to me. I thought that question around can non-technical people use this product at the end is so important. The power of a tool like that is that you get it into the hands of people who are doing the analysis. Also that question around can your team maintain it? And it's not just sort of the security checks and stuff like that, but actually keeping on top of innovations. So thank you so much again for sharing that, Damani, really helpful. Our final question that we're looking at, or that final conversation, is around AI insights being in other tools. Talk us through that is Steph, our head of product. So over to you, Steph.
Thanks, Nat. Right, let's dive in. Yeah, so with AI developments being so accessible now, the tendency across products is to bolt it on and let users apply it to whatever they want. But this causes lots of confusion around whether it's appropriate for text analytics in Voice of Customer. So, for example, we're seeing it being added to lots of data gathering tools, your surveys, your feedback platforms, and these tools are brilliant at what they're built for, which is gathering the data. But the AI has been added to do a slightly different function, namely analyzing that data. And as users, we don't know how robust these AI features actually are. So have they just tacked on an LLM to chat with you with no real guardrails or methodology? Or is it genuinely well thought out? And if we think back to Hugh's matrix from earlier, have they built it in such a way where it's sitting in that sort of top right of the quadrant, or is it landing in those more risky areas? So when you're evaluating whether to use these built-in features, helpful questions you can ask yourself are, how do I know it's looked at all of my data and not just a sample? How has it decided to categorize my feedback, and can I influence that? Can I track specific conversations I care about, or am I stuck with whatever it decides to show me? And am I able to get to the root cause of problems, or am I seeing surface level insights? Because if we go back all the way back to the goals that Nat mentioned at the beginning, so depth, flexibility, accuracy, and speed, with these add-on features, understanding what's happening under the hood's super important. You might ask it a question and it'll give you an answer back, but you don't know how much of your data has been considered, how it arrived at the answer, and whether it would adjust its response based on more business context. And it's this sort of lack of transparency and control that tends to be where you have to make compromises. And as well as those considerations, you're still in that situation where you're using different AI across different tools to analyze your data. And by using each tool to analyze the data it brings in, you've got the situation of different AI models using different analysis methodologies, and this causes conflicting insights from different sources, no single source of truth, and departments each proposing different priorities of what needs fixing. As well as this, there's obviously blind spots because you're not bringing in all of that data together to actually see everything as a whole. And naturally, teams are arguing over whose data's right. So if you can relate to any of this, it's likely that a specialist tool might be helpful for you. Because with specialist tools for your text analytics, you're able to hit these goals that I mentioned earlier without compromising on any of them. You can bring all of your data together, analyze it consistently with one methodology, and this gives you the ability to do proper prioritization and gather that evidence that you need to take to the board. As well as that, you're actually able to get the depth and scale within your program to find real insights in your data that are going to help you change the customer experience for the better. And you're also able to benefit from the continuous innovation that happens within these specialist tools. So Damani's just walked you through our example of definition-led themes. Glad to see lots of you saying that that's exciting. We're super excited to release it. But that's come from us applying new technology to this problem. And as a product team, we're always looking to develop the platform. And obviously, this involves leveraging new tech. And I guess the real sort of plus point is you get the benefit of that without any of those maintenance burdens that Damani mentioned. So, the infrastructure, the security, all of those overheads that come with it. So with specialist tools, flexibility always tends to be a consideration. It's certainly one of the core pillars that we focus on. And so you also get those benefits of being able to mold it to your particular use case, but without any of those commitments that maybe come with building it yourself. Hopefully that shows you the difference and the benefits you can get from sort of intentional AI adoption in your VOC program. And I'll hand back over to you, Nat.
Fab. Thank you so much, Steph. I know that conversation in particular is just super noisy at the moment as more and more tools add on AI insights, and it's really hard to understand what it all means. So what now? We're going to go back to where we started, what we're trying to get out of today, have a look at those key learnings, and then look at what that means for you. We're also going to have that live Q&A at the end. Please do keep your questions coming in the chat, and we will get to them shortly. So if we go back to the start, these are the questions that we were looking to help, well, these are the conversations we were looking to help you navigate and lead in your organization after today. So when we're looking at, let's just put it in Copilot, let's build it ourselves. We have AI, insights and other tools, and one we haven't got onto yet. So people who think it's all hype and want to wait and see. So where are we now? I think the key takeaways are using the right AI for the right job, and bearing in mind that most of the hype that you're hearing is about Gen AI specifically. So using that assessment framework for adopting Gen AI can be super helpful. An action you might want to take away today is audit how you're using Gen AI now, and does it pass that test? When it comes to building, build with AI when it makes sense. Consider, can non-technical people actually use what you're building? Can your team maintain it? And can you keep on top of innovations? What Hugh and Damani have walked through is our latest version of themes. Our last version before that was out in the last 18 months. I'm sure there'll be something else coming out in the next 18 months. It's a constant job to keep on top of the latest technology. And finally, how is the AI in your tech stack really working for you? Are the right tools and right AI doing the right job? Is it joined up? And ultimately, can you make confident decisions? That's something that we think these are the helpful key takeaways for you to leave with today. Final thought, it's all hype, let's just wait and see. There is a lot of hype, but don't let that stop you. AI advancements present amazing opportunities and you don't want to miss out, but it is moving fast. Being intentional is the key to getting value, and that's what we're hoping we've helped you do today. So this could be what those conversations look like next time. As I mentioned before, do keep those questions coming in the chat. We're going to move over to them very shortly. So Hugh, Damani, and Steph will all be available to take your questions. I can think from having a look at the questions that come in already, I think there's someone who is a data scientist, because it's a question that only a data scientist would ask. So we'll get to those shortly. Fab. And just a reminder that we'll be sending you out the recording today. So you'll get that straight after the session ends. You'll get the full recording. And then later on in the week, you'll get a full resource kit, including that assessment framework and all of these sections broken down in chapters for you to share easily in your organization. We're also going to be rolling out the release of those definition-led themes next month, and we'll be in touch with you about that. So over to our Q&A. Going to go first to a question from Theo. So the ease and effort to train looks great. It's similar to what we currently use. I know Theo, so I know you guys are one of our customers already. In terms of time, can I assume this will also take a lot less time to train, or is it just about the accuracy? Hopefully it's both. Who wants to take that question?
Should I take it?
Go for it, Steph.
So hi Theo. I think so. Our aim is this is definitely quicker on both counts. So both the speed and the accuracy. It's certainly been that case during our internal testing. We do have a bit more internal testing to go, where we're hoping to reduce that speed even more. Increase the speed of training it. But yeah, so it's meant to be on both. The whole point of kind of the manual tagging process that Hugh kind of described, which I know you're familiar with, we're just kind of removing that completely. So it's really just about refining that definition. And as soon as you get to a good definition that you can see the results are kind of acknowledging it correctly, then you can go and enable it. And then you also get the speed of it being applied to your data as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
Fab, thanks so much, Steph. Okay, next we've got a question from Anthony. This looks like a really meaty one. I reckon this is one for you, Damani. So this is super cool and really interesting. Thank you. You mentioned that the outcome of your exploration and testing was a hybrid approach performed best. Did this involve using Gemini to train your custom-built model, or training an open source SLM, for example? Appreciate any info or insight you can share. This is the one I'm guessing is from a data guy.
Yeah, I can answer that. So our final approach was using a combination of, we use Gemini to help us tag a small amount of data. And then we distill that kind of performance into a kind of really small neural network. So that's one that we kind of custom built. We experimented with a few different kind of architectures for that, and different structures, and different kind of ways of distilling it into kind of a much smaller neural network. But it's a very small neural network that we're able to use, which is why we get the massive kind of improvement in speed and cost, but we don't really need to compromise on accuracy, which was one of the kind of positive things that we found about our experimentation, is that we could get comparable results to what you get from just using an LLM on its own, with a much smaller, much more lightweight neural network. So it's not even, I wouldn't even call it a language model. It's just a kind of small, very, very small neural network.
Just to add one thing to that, the reason we didn't end up going down the small language model approach is because it didn't, like our benchmarking suggested that we were never going to achieve the kind of speeds of applying the theme that we wanted to get to. From our point of view, the way this should work is somebody figures out what they want to measure, makes it and sets it off and measures it and knows the answer in 10 minutes. That it shouldn't be a thing where you have to come back tomorrow. And we couldn't make a small language model work that fast. So I totally agree with what Demystifying just said about this. We have a very small network in the end, actually making the predictions, but it's based that on pre-generated embeddings of all of the text. So we've done the really heavy lifting as the data arrives on our platform, because data normally arrives in, you know, an upload a week or through an API trickling in, you know, one every minute. We do the heavy lifting at the start, so that by the time you want to apply a theme, we already have the really the meaty bit of data done by you know, quite a sizable sentence embedding model that we can then rapidly apply small models on top of. That's what gives us the power to do it so quickly.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Hugh and Damani, for explaining that. Next, I think we've got a couple more questions to go. If there is anyone with any questions as well, do pop them in and we'll get to them. So next I've got a couple of questions about the definition-led themes. Can't wait to try, you and me both, Isla. Can I keep my old themes? And if not, what will that migration process look like? Damani, is that one for you as well?
I can take that one. So the goal is eventually we want all of our themes to move over to this new definition-led themes. They are better. We've done a lot of testing to validate that they are better. And we've looked at kind of what happens if we move our older themes to these new themes. So we've come up with a migration process as well, which is where we take the data that you'd already tagged. We'll use kind of generative AI to develop a definition based on what you've tagged already. So you won't need to go and rewrite all these definitions if you've got loads of themes already. Then it will generate the definition, and then it will go and kind of do the regular process that that will happen for new definition-led themes. So we'll tag kind of a small sample of data, and then we'll distill that into one of these kind of lightweight models, and it will work in exactly the same way. And what we should see for the vast majority of cases is that you'll see an improvement in the accuracy of those themes as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Damani. That all sounds really good. Okay, our last question, and I reckon this is one for Hugh. So interesting. Can I check, having also seen your new definition-led theme tech, do you use my data to train LLMs?
Yeah, it's a great question. The short answer is no, we don't. So we're not using anyone's data that they brought to us, or the public data you see in your projects to train the LLMs. It's a great question though, because if you're just using like ChatGPT through like a normal free account or whatever, it absolutely will be training that LLM on it. But that's not what we're doing. We're using you know, fully kind of properly set up bit of technology within Google to do this for this kind of purpose. So where the LLM we're using sees the data, gives us the answer, and then it's gone, and that's all, you know, locked down and well kind of documented. So that stuff is a very legitimate concern, but not an issue here.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And as you said, it's really legitimate question, actually one we get quite a lot. So thank you so much for going through that. Well, guys, it doesn't look like there's any more questions, and there's just 2 minutes left before 3. So I'll give you the gift of time to go and get yourself another cup of tea before your next meeting. Thanks again for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. And remember to keep an eye on your inbox, both for the recording today and the full resource pack later this week. Thank you.